Hi guys, it's Andrew here from smartgardenguide.com, and this is a video about overwatering your houseplants, and in particular overwatering Monstera Deliciosa or Swiss cheese plants. I wanted to make this video because I've actually got two Monstera here, and one has been overwatered and the other one hasn't. And interestingly, they've both been growing in the same room, in the same conditions, and looked after by myself. So you would sort of wonder, how on earth have I overwatered one and not the other? And we're just going to go through some of the symptoms that this plant has, what I've done wrong, and how I'm going to try and fix it. So first of all, this is my overwatered Monstera. It's quite a small plant, and as you can see, it's got one yellowing lower leaf. Now, this plant has had about 5 or 6 lower leaves that have turned yellow, and I have progressively pruned them off as they've just become completely yellow. You can also see it's got one new leaf, and this leaf does not look desperately healthy. It has got brown tips on it. So if you were looking at this plant, you might think, right, it's got a yellow leaf, and the most common cause of yellowing leaves is overwatering. It's not the only cause by any means, but it is the most common cause. So you immediately think, could this be an overwatered plant? And then you might look at this new leaf and see the brown tips and think, well, brown tips, surely that's not overwatering, surely that's underwatering, or possibly a sign of low humidity. And of course the answer is no. Both of these symptoms, in fact, these symptoms together are a real warning sign that your plant's been overwatered. And the reason why it happens is an overwatered plant develops unhealthy roots. So the roots languish in soggy soil, they develop root rot, they're no longer able to function as they normally would. The plant makes a decision to shed some of its foliage in an effort to survive. So it picks the older, lower leaves as candidates, and they turn yellow and die, favouring the younger, more healthy foliage. As the roots aren't absorbing enough water, some of the younger, more sensitive foliage can't get the amount of water that it needs to be healthy, and the parts of the leaf that are most sensitive to a lack of water are the leaf tips. So that's why the leaf tips go brown, because the roots aren't absorbing enough water for it because they've got root rot. So these bits die. I think the rest of this leaf is going to be okay eventually. It's not going to recover fully by any means, but it's still doing a job for the plant, so we're not going to get rid of this. So why has this happened? You know, as you can see, I've got, this plant's developed root rot. This plant has been growing in the same room as it, in the same conditions, and I've treated them exactly the same. So why is this one absolutely thriving? This one's produced loads of new leaves, and this one is absolutely languishing. Well, there's a few reasons. So reason number one is the pot. This smaller Monstera is in a larger pot relative to the size of the plant. So there's more soil for the amount of plant material. So when I water this, it takes a longer time period for the plant to use up the water in the soil, and for the water to evaporate from the soil and dry out and be ready to be watered again. So part of the reason might be that this plant's drying out more quickly, this plant's drying out more slowly, and maybe I'm watering the two on a bit of a schedule, and this one's being relatively overwatered. The other reason, of course, is this plant has so much more foliage, so it's using a lot more water. This is a young plant and it's using less foliage. The third reason might be that the choice of soil for the plants. This smaller plant I only got maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and it arrived just in pure peat. So it did, and peat is very good at absorbing moisture, holding water, but it's not a very good draining potting mix. But I didn't repot the plant, I just left it in the peat. I kind of thought it would be okay. My other Monstera here is potted in an aroid mix of, I think there's some cocoa coir, bark chips, pumice, perlite, and activated charcoal. I think there might be a bit of leca in there as well. So that's a much better draining potting mix, so it doesn't tend to produce soggy soil. It retains a wee bit of water for the plant to stop it drying out, but excess water drains out nicely. This plant, unfortunately, the soil was another factor in terms of why it got overwatered. So what have I done with this plant to try and save it? Well, first thing I did was I took it out of its pot, I examined the roots, I used sterile pruning shears to prune off any affected roots, and there were a few roots that were showing signs of root rot. The next thing I did was I repotted it into an aroid potting mix so that it drained much, much better. I then just watered it very, very lightly to stop it from showing further signs of underwatering. And I have, over the last month or 6 weeks, been very careful to err on the side of caution with watering of this plant. Now, despite that, the roots are damaged and the plant is struggling, so there has been progressive yellowing of more leaves since I've tried to save this plant. That's to be expected. The plant isn't focused on the foliage, it's focusing on survival. So what's going to happen to this plant is if I treat it right, the roots slowly are going to stabilize, and then it's going to start growing new roots, and then eventually it'll start growing new foliage. The foliage that's damaged currently won't recover, but if I'm careful, I think I can save this plant. What could I do to prevent this happening again? Well, there's a few things. Number one, I want to make sure that the plant's growing in good temperatures, so temperatures that are comfortable for it. If you grow your houseplants in cooler temperatures, the plant will use less water and there'll be less evaporation of water from the soil, so this will cause the soil to stay wetter for longer. I could repot this plant into a terracotta pot, which is porous, and that'll mean that some of the water in the soil will seep through those pores and out of the soil after watering, and it'll help the soil to dry out quicker. I could pot this plant in a smaller pot so that, again, the soil dries out quicker after watering. Really importantly, I should make sure that it's getting plenty of light, because plants need light to make energy to grow. So if you have your Monstera in a dark location, it's not going to be actively growing. It's just going to sit there. It's not going to use as much water, and it's going to be at increased risk of root rot. So I could move this closer to a window, give it more light, give it higher temperatures, put it in a smaller pot, put it in a porous pot, and of course, crucially, only water this plant when it needs to be watered. So really dig my fingers into the soil to make sure that the soil is dried out sufficiently before watering it. Check how wet the soil is through the drainage holes at the bottom. Feel the weight of the pot to get an idea of how heavy it is, how much water is left in the soil, and err on the side of caution. Only water it when you're sure that it needs water. Monsteras are quite capable of surviving a wee bit of drought, so definitely better to take it easy with the watering. So thanks very much, guys, for watching. I just wanted to highlight this interesting situation where I've got two similar plants, one running into problems and the other one not, despite being grown in exactly the same place by myself. I hope you've enjoyed this, hope it's been useful, and please, if you have any questions, ask them in the comments section. If you've liked this video, please press the like button, and please consider subscribing to the channel for plenty more houseplant care videos coming up soon.